So we'll jump now into another direction. I've been speaking a lot about material. Now we shall go for more, let's say, abstract things, and I will speak now about ruling and page setting. When I started, I've been showing you this manuscript, which was without any clear project. It was written as it came. Usually when you deal with a manuscript, you find that from the start people had some idea in their mind, and even if you look at the first copies of the Quran, as in this case, you notice that there is something on the sheet which is, in this case it's not visible, which prepared the script, what is called a ruling. When you are taking notes, well, you are not in this case, but very often you have, well, the museum doesn't allow for ruling on the paper pads he distributes among you, because they certainly know that you are perfect calligraphers and write horizontally, but usually we need some aid in order to write properly, and this is why ruling was invented. Even in the case of this manuscript, which was transcribed by the end of the 7th century, with lines varying from 20 to 26 to the page, so you may think that there was no plan. But if you look closely, you will notice that there is a frame which was indicated on the parchment with a metallic tool. It's very discreet, because this is also important. It should not be too visible. And it tells us that from the start, copyists were using some devices to write properly, and that they had plans, they had idea of the ideal presentation of the copy they were transcribing. In some cases, it's fascinating that, for example, in North Africa, people only with a vertical line were able to produce horizontal lines. But what is more common to find, above all with paper manuscript, because my first examples were dealing with parchment, is this kind of thing. You certainly noticed at the end of manuscript that on a blank page you will have lines which appear like that, and they are the result of a very simple tool which was used with paper, the mistara, which helped producing the same pattern of lines on every single page of a manuscript. With parchment, it was different. You had to do the preparation over and over again, because it was not possible to reproduce the same pattern directly on the parchment. With paper, which is more supple and takes more easily the imprint of the mistara, it was mechanical, and there was no big variation between the beginning and the end of a manuscript. Another example here of the imprint of a mistara. You see that the lines are very visible with some light coming from the side. On the other hand, it's not too heavily marked, and once it's written, you will not notice that there was a preparation. Ruling is not restricted to writing. Actually, illuminators also use that, as do binders when they prepare the decoration of binding. They may use a ruling in order to have the stamps put in the proper position. In some cases, the ruling is a very simple one. In this case, for example, the copyist of this manuscript written in Central Asia just folded the page in this way, And the crease was enough for him to write the text in a very coherent manner. What is fascinating to me remain the manuscripts written on parchment during the, let's say, end of the 8th and 9th century. Because in this case, when you look at the script, you notice that the lines are perfectly horizontal, but there is no trace of ruling. They apparently were either able to write without any help, but I doubt it very much, because actually the variation between two pages, if you measure this from the bottom to the top, is with 1 or 2 millimeters of variation the same on all the pages. So they certainly had a device which left absolutely no trace on the parchment. With paper manuscript, as I said, the Mr. is almost invisible. It's just in places where you have the title here with some blank space which allows you to see the trace of the Mr. But if you look here, the Mr. disappears completely. It's no longer visible. The page setting from the start was using the system of long lines, which has remained the basis for the transcriptions of texts in the Islamic world. You remember my first example, the Quranic manuscript with long lines. In this example of the 16th century, from Ottoman Turkey, you have the same way of writing the text with long lines. It may have some variations, as in this Iranian example from the same period, with, let's say, change of in the 8th of the script and in the length of the lines between the main lines and the two parts which are in smaller script. But in the end, the system remains the same. It may also vary if you have an additional element added to the basic text. Here it's a Quranic text with the translation into Urdu written in the lines in red in order to indicate the difference, but basically we remain with the same system. This also applies to this example. We have a commentary of one of the muallaka on this page. The verses of the text are written in larger letters, and the commentary comes in smaller letters. It may happen that artificially, if I may say so, the verses are divided, but in the end, the verse is this. Of course, it appears as two pieces of text, but we know that it's perfectly the same. You have to go to a very specific example like that, where the calligrapher decided for aesthetic reason to distribute the text in another way, to go out of the general picture I represented previously. Of course, there are some special cases when illustration is required, for example, in this geometry treatise, where figures are needed, that the copyist would leave a space here. And here we have a nice example. There was also the need for a picture which was never added, a case which is rather common because we all know of manuscripts which were intended with illumination or pictures which were never added. I will just mention for the sake of the comprehensivity, this case of paintings, where the text has to adapt to the image, or the image to the text as it was written by the copyist. And I will turn to something which is strangely enough, not very studied the title pages of Islamic manuscript. It's very fascinating that there is a long tradition of title pages. Actually, in the West, with the printed book, the first title pages appear in the end of the 15th century. Before that, the title is found usually at the end of the text. In the Islamic world, we have example of title pages from the 9th century, and in many cases there is some let's say calligraphic appearance, or at least an effort to put the information in a certain way, which I will show briefly for just in order to show what it can how it can be. Well, this is another rather elaborate example. Usually you find this triangular shape with less, let's say, less care. But even in some cases, you have the title, which is organized according to a very specific distribution if there is an illumination. In this case, well, this presentation is a rather common one, and it will lead to the next presentation of my talk, because the title page, of course, with this lot of white space, is an invitation to ownership statements and any kind of comments which can be added. Of course, we may lament that illumination is sometimes defaced by some scribbling which is not exactly calligraphic, but of course the book historian is very happy when he finds this kind of situation with a lot of information about the history of the book. In some cases, what started as an almost void page turns to be a very crowded page, like in this case, with many kind of information. It's amazing because you have every kind of statement about ownership, but also information about the author, the text, even records of birth, death, earthquake, and so on. Here another example of a title page of this kind. In the West, strangely enough, the triangular shape, which is so common in the East, is sometimes replaced by a more rectangular presentation of the title. The information is about the same, only the way of distributing it is different. This is once again a rather ornate presentation, but you find very often this same distribution in the title page of many manuscripts. Of course, title pages are not essential. Many manuscripts don't have any title at all. You have to find it by yourself, but very often you will find the title in an unexpected place on the side of the book, because as the books were kept flat on the shelves and not vertical as in modern libraries, it was often more convenient to have this information conveyed in the side of the book, on the visible when it was laid flat. Titles also appear within the manuscript when there are some chapters, or where the book is a collection of various treatises. Then you will find a title here. Well, another example of what I said before, that the plans made for the book, that is to say, including illumination, were never carried out. And in this case, the blank space for the illumination was just left for the title of one of the contents of the book. In many instances, the beginning of the text will be also a place of special care for the copyist. The incipit, that is to say the beginning of the text, may be a little bit more elaborate than the rest of the text. This is a rather simple presentation with in the tradition of the Western Islamic world, the basmala and the tasliya on the first line, and then the incipit proper on the next lines. It can be, of course, in the best examples, richly illuminated with some kind of lavishness in the showing off in the presentation of the page. It can be including an incipit frame. We have, of course, to invent a terminology to define those various elements of the Islamic book, which are called in various ways, unvan, unwan, and so on. There is no general agreement about the way in which things should be called, but this, of course, is a weak point in our study, that we need to speak in the same way of the various components of the book. Another point of special presentation of the text is the colophon. I will come to this topic a little bit later about when I will be speaking of history. The colophon is very often, as the title page, presented with the triangular shape you find in this way. This is a rather late example, but it's representative of something which is widespread. You find examples from North Africa to Central Asia, even if in some cases, North Africa in particular, the presentation may be slightly different. That's another example. Well, the triangle in some cases may look a little bit awkward. You have many instances that when the copyist seems to have been a little bit surprised to reach the end of the text and not to have prepared the nice triangular presentation. But nevertheless, there was some effort from his part to find a triangle. Of course, this may be illuminated in the best manuscripts, and you see that in this case, again, the triangular presentation is preserved for this very important information, because after all, it's here that we will find the date, the name of the copyist, the place of the copy, of course, if we are lucky. As I said, in the Islamic West, in North Africa and southern Spain, there was another tradition. And you see in this example, I will enlarge it, you see here the colophon, which is rather detailed, but the presentation is very different with this rectangular shape, which we find in this early example of the 8th century of the Hijra, or is in this later example where this rectangular disposition is maintained. The idea is to distinguish between the text proper with the explicit and the colophon itself, which has to show by itself that it is no longer the text, that what happens actually is that the copyist in the end, after many hours of tedious work in transcribing the text, at least has 4 or 5 lines to tell who he is and when he was working. And very often, for our despair, he doesn't even care to give us this information. There are, of course, stranger shapes for the colophons, as this colophon, which is arranged in a diamond shape here. Of course, it depends a little on the wish of the calligrapher, and we have cases of, we will find an example later, of colophons which are arranged in a circular way, within a circle. The margins are also an element which requires some attention because it's an empty space. Actually, it's very strange that the oldest manuscripts we have, this Quranic manuscript of the end of the 7th century, are precisely without any margin. Of course, you could think that it's because they were trimmed during the centuries, that the rebinding process led to the disappearance of part of the parchment. But no, it's not the case. In this manuscript, we know that it was from the start a manuscript without any margins because we have precisely the border of the edge of the parchment visible here, which means that there was no place for more parchment. So it was, once again, the wish of the copyist to avoid any margin in this case. Margins appear in the 8th century. All of a sudden, the Quranic manuscripts are equipped with large margins, and margins will become a part of the Islamic manuscript either as a show of lavishness because much material is spent without any regard to the price, or because it has a scholarly purpose. It will be the place where you will find some commentaries about the text and some notes. It is also a place where the illuminator will be able to put his own addition to the text, because it's of course there that you will find some specific ornaments. Of course, in the scholarly tradition, as one saying puts it, a good manuscript is dark, is black, because it's so full of text that you don't have any blank space left. And actually, when you look at this copy, you understand this saying. In this case, we suspect that it was meant from the start as a copy which was organized for this marginal commentaries, because actually the space left for the text is rather limited. But even in other cases where space was also rather generously provided for these comments, here we have a tafsir with the Quranic text here and the comments running from every single word into the margin. Even with many space left, of course, the result is rather appealing to any reader who wants to delve into these comments, which actually require a lot of movement, because you have to turn the book in every direction in order to be able to read. But, well, it's good. Intellectuals usually don't make any sport, and it's a good opportunity to do. Of course, nice manuscripts will have foreseen the need for commentary, and in this case we have a nice example of what amounts to 3 texts in one. We have, of course, the Quranic text here, then the translation, and here a tafsir. And in this case, of course, from the start, the Mistara was done in order to accommodate the 3 levels of text. So it's not so much a matter of, let's say, lack of planning from the part of the manuscript. It's more a matter of level of production. Once again, we are back to the questions we have to make when looking at a manuscript. Who wrote it, when, where, for whom, and so on. In this case, of course, we have a question of levels of production, quite obviously. Next. So after this short presentation of the way in which the page setting was seen, I will go to a last point before we turn to the manuscripts which are on the table. The last chapter sounds like an invitation to think of the history of the manuscripts. We have to think once again that in a world with, well, I say this in Istanbul, and it's not the proper place to say that because they are archived in Turkey. But Ottoman Turkey was, in this respect, different from other places in the Islamic world, where we don't have any archive at all. And very often, the archives, the only archives we have, are in the manuscripts where many things, in the end, are recorded. Once again, these manuscripts are an important part of the Islamic civilization, and the information they have should be taken into account. And it's a pity that very often some important notes found in manuscript are just not mentioned in catalogs because well, first, you have to make the effort to read that, and of course, it's not always very easy. And then catalogs were often conceived more as printed books catalogs. That is to say, what is important in a catalog is the title, the name of the author, and with that, everybody is happy. It's not my case. So, we have to go back to the title pages and go a little bit more into this. Let's look, for example, at my first example, and we see in the upper part a short note which has nothing to do with the title, which is an ownership statement by someone who calls himself Abdallah Ta'ala Zaidan, Amir al-Mu'minin. It's the name of a ruler of Morocco by the beginning of the 17th century, owner of a very nice library, who provided some of his book with an ex libris. In this case, of course, it's important because it gives us a very an insight into what could be a sultan's library at that period in the Western Islamic world. The same things here with his mark again, but in this case, as I said previously, before reaching the extreme part, the westernmost part of the Islamic world, this manuscript, which was written in Egypt, had a long life in the East. And as you can note, there are many statements on this opening page which convey the same information. You see, for example, here, Alhamdulillah min kutub. So these are ex libris, these are notes which were left by the successive owners of the book in order to record their ownership. This is important because, for example, in some cases you have an undated manuscript. There is no colophon or the colophon has disappeared, but of course if you have some ownership statements with a date, you will, for example, here you have a date, you will be able to push back the date of the production of the manuscript according to the information you have here. Of course, here it's easy because there is an illumination, so it's a matter of style and many other things, but it's not always so simple. Another example to show you that the title pages and the ownership statements sometimes are frustrating when someone decided that it was better to tamper with the information. Well, you never know exactly why. In some cases, see, yes, it's clear because, for example, it's waqfiye, which means that in principle the book shouldn't have moved from the library, and you understand that the next owner decided that it was better to eliminate a witness which was not exactly the nicest one. Here a classical page of, and we turn now to a few examples of colophons. So the colophon is found at the end of the book, but be careful, because when you have a manuscript with many parts, let's say you have 4 books in a text, you may find a colophon after the second or the third, but nothing at the end. So it's not just a matter of jumping at the end of the manuscript in order to have the answer to the question. Very often you have to look carefully through the manuscript in order to identify the place where you find the date. And the more so that in the case of a manuscript with, let's say, the same text and 2, 3, 4 colophons, you may have also elements for something which, after all, is important, is how did people work? If you have dates for the transcription of a text, you can make hypothesis about the way in which the copyist was writing. How much time did it take to transcribe 10, 20, 40 pages? We never know. Of course, we have some texts in the classical literature on calligraphy which either say, so and so was a so good calligrapher that it took him 1 month to transcribe a page, or conversely, he was so nice a calligrapher that in his life he transcribed a Quran per year. So you have very contrasting reports on that. I don't say that the information gained from the colophons will completely change the picture, but it's good to have another appreciation of things with this kind of documents, which after all may be genuine. I say maybe because we'll see that it's not always the case. Well, in the case of my former colophon, so we have here a late colophon with date, another one. So it's sometimes complicated because you have a lot of formula which accumulate. Here you have to wait a long time because you have an indication about the title, then formula about the taslia, and then in the end you reach the place where the name of the copyist appears, and this again may be connected with many epithets saying that he is unworthy, poor, feeble, sinner, and so on. So there is some kind of literature which you have to know. It's not very difficult to read colophons. It's a matter of experience because there is not an infinity of terms. Something which can vary is when you encounter verses, because it also happens that people had some verses to express themselves, and for a long time I thought that these verses found at the end of a manuscript where the man is saying that he's old and that his hand is shaky and that he asks the reader to say basmala because he will pass away. I thought that it was to be taken seriously, but it seemed that there were verses common and they repeat a lot. So even in that case, don't be afraid. Look at the literature on the colophons and you may find the answer to the decipherment of a text which otherwise might prove difficult to read. In some cases, you will find another information. Of course, this may not happen with manuscripts containing, for example, many paintings, because the emphasis will be another topic. But you may find in many cases in scholarly manuscripts notes about the correction of the text, because of course when you have this experience today, when you are typing with your computer, you know that you have to read again your text in order to be sure that you didn't make any mistake. The same happened when it was a matter of hard work for the copyist to transcribe pages and pages, because we have manuscripts which have 300, 400 pages. So it's a lot of text, and of course it might happen that at some moment the copyist did a mistake. So it was a matter, a very important matter, and actually in some treatises on scholarship, on Islamic scholarship, we have recommendation about buying books, buying manuscripts which contain information proving that the text has been certified, if I may use this modern word. This is what means this note here, which records actually the many the end of the operation of control of the text, because usually it was performed in various days, and at the end of each day the man or the people in charge of the collation of the text would put in the text either balagha al-mukabila, which is what is written here, or simply balagha, and so the next day they would find the place and go on until the end of the manuscript. And here you have the final note with the date and the name of the people who did this control. Well, in this case again, sometimes the colophon is not so obvious to find. You have here the colophon which is written in a very cursory hand, and in some cases it may be before the end of the text if for some reason the copyist decided to write something after that. Well, I will go quickly through these examples. More complicated but important are the reading certificates. They are also part of the elements for the history of the book you may find when looking in a manuscript. Here you have the colophon, so you have the end of the text, and the colophon with the date, and you see that in a clearly different hand someone started to write Sami'a ala. So this, when you find this, or when you find Qara'a at the beginning of one of those texts, you will know that you have what is called either a reading or a hearing certificate. That is to say, in the process of classical transmission of knowledge in the Islamic world, in order to give the students the right to transmit the text at his turn, the master gave him an ijaza, the name of this document. And it's interesting that even if the official presentation is oral, that is to say sama, listen, or kara, read, in the end it was the written certificate which was added to the manuscript as a proof of the transmission process. Be careful, because sometimes it's, well, you have pages and pages, and you may have some cases where these were not original, that they were transcribed with the text. That means that the copyist, in order to give the guarantee that the copy he was transmitting was a good one, also transcribe the previous certificates in order to give the pedigree, the transmission of the text over the centuries. So it may be confusing sometimes, because they usually are very precise. They give names, they give dates, they give places, and so you may think, the oldest one is in Mosul in 531, so the manuscript should have been written in northern Iraq at the end of the 6th century of the Hijra. But it may be that it's a manuscript of the 9th century which reproduces very carefully the previous certificates. Well, this in my previous examples, they were at the end of the manuscript. They can be found on the title page here in this example. And it's very interesting because sometimes you will find, let's say, the places in this manuscript is fascinating. You see that it has been transcribed in the eastern part of the Islamic world. The script is clearly Oriental. Well, my example, well, down there is another certificate. So this one are Eastern certificates, and at the bottom there is a Western certificate, which means that the manuscript moved towards Morocco during its lifetime. In addition to these notes, which are directly connected to the transcription of the text and the transmission, you have also other notes. The waqfiyeh, when a manuscript was given as a waqf to an institution, be it a mosque, a madrasa, or zawiya, or whatever you want. As you know, this can be fairly extensive, as in this case, where you have the name of the turba of the Carafa cemetery in Cairo, or in another one from Egypt. Sometimes it's maybe only the mention because the main text has been lost. Well, in principle, this should not be touched, but in the end, the matter of the possibility of having books given as waqf to an institution was questioned by Muslim scholars. Some thought that it was perfectly correct. Others considered that, with the exception of the Quran, it was not permitted to do that. So this explains, well, this is maybe an explanation why you find manuscripts with waqf marks in many libraries far from their original setting. At the beginning of the manuscript, you will find sometimes, well, the famous ownership statements. Either, in that case, the original. In this rondel, it has been tempered because, of course, once again, the previous owners are not always welcome in a new collection. So the name of the person who had this manuscript transcribed was carefully deleted by a later owner, who perhaps was the author of this note, which has been in its turn defaced by a later owner. Well, we find again our friend Zaidan in this example. So you will find, well, the formula has many. You will find this formula, min kutub, which is very common and very easy. Finauba here twice. And you will find, I will turn to it later, also seals, which are an easier and quicker way of expressing the ownership of a manuscript. I show you this because it's a manuscript in the Escorial collection with this Sahib, who was Mahmoud Bey ibn Mehmet Pasha. So a book which maybe has been was in Algiers and then came to Morocco and ended in the Escorial collection. In addition to these notes, well, you may find also this kind of things, the magic squares, and the various notes which are connected with daily life. Well, this is not at its place. Like this, the record of the death of someone found on a manuscript. You will find on a manuscript many notes which are related to the daily life. And once again, I turn back to my argument about the archives. In many cases, we have some kind of archive when people know note down this kind of family events in the books. Of course, Quranic manuscripts are particularly concerned because in many instances they tended to remain in a family, and I have found in the Shah-Mevrak collection some examples where you have the record of the birth in a family in the 9th and 10th century, which is something which you will not find anywhere else. Of course, there is also another kind of note you may find at the beginning of the manuscript. This is a Kabikaj note, which is supposed to keep away any rodents and animals or insects which may hurt the manuscript. It's rather common, and you may find it in various way. This manuscript was especially pleasant because it's in the four corners. The owner was very eager to avoid any attack from any part. So this this is another misplaced. Well, this was another comment on the Muqabila note. We have seen that. Well, something which sometimes appears in manuscripts are, let's say, papers which were originally on the outside of the manuscript and they have been kept. In many cases, being outside of the manuscript, they have been lost. It's part of the history of the manuscript because they were usually part of a library, and they represent some way of keeping the books. We have very little proofs about that, and this kind of evidence, of course, is important for the history of the libraries. As I said, unfortunately, very often the notes are not legible, either because they are written in a very bad hand, and we have seen some examples before, but also because later owners, users, readers decided to eliminate a note. So this is a Waqf note which has been erased. I've shown previously this nice example with two ownership statements erased one after the other. Well, this is part of the history. Of course, when you deal with this kind of thing, you can succeed in reading. There are various techniques today with digital photography. You can enlarge this sufficiently as to be able to recover part of the text. If this doesn't work, you can also use ultraviolet light to look at the manuscript, knowing that you cannot use it too much. If not, it could harm the manuscript. There are extreme cases like this one. I've been trying to read this note during some times, but some people were really very eager to eliminate any trace and succeeded in eliminating any possibility of reading. Last point, seals. It's a big lacuna in our studies that we don't have any database with stamps. There are, of course, collection here and there of manuscript. For example, the one which was started recently with the Chester Beatty, for example, or in Cambridge. So slowly things are coming out, but we are often often finding stamps which are not so easy to read, but sometimes we can make something out of them. But of course, what is missing is eventually the link with the person who owned the stamp. And well, it is only by collecting the information and crossing the information that it will be possible to find a solution to the understanding of these stamps, which are important in many instances for the trade with books. The book trade is important, and of course we can detect the movements when we find, for example, that books bearing the same stamp have been sold to various places, or on the contrary, that we can reconstruct a library thanks to the identification of the stamp which is found on them. Be careful that the stamps are found on title pages, of course, but in many cases also within the manuscript. People were not so lazy and didn't hesitate to put their stamp in various places in order to ensure that their ownership will be recognized. Well, books speak a lot, I do too, but they do not always tell the truth. In many instances, what you see or read on a book should be taken with caution. I will not speak too much about this, but I will show you two examples which are rather clear. Here we have the colophon, or, well, so-called colophon of a manuscript which is in the Turkish and Islamic Art Museum in Istanbul, with a colophon was stating that it was transcribed by Caliph Othman in the year 30. So, of course, it's obvious that this is a later addition, and that it has been put on an illumination from a later date, which was originally meant to be vertical and not horizontal. And you see that it doesn't fit very well into the illuminated frame. So this is a rather crude situation, very easy to detect. And of course, if we did C14 analysis of the parchment, we would instead discover that it's something of the 10th century. And here another case, and with a calligrapher. It's again a manuscript which is in the Museum of the Turkish and Islamic Art, with a colophon which has been tampered in order to put the name of the famous calligrapher Ibn al-Bawwab, Ali ibn Hilal al-Baghdadi in this case. Well, when looking closely at the manuscript, one sees that the paper has been erased in order to put rather awkwardly the name of the calligrapher in this place. So this is a call for caution. When you look at a manuscript, you have to look carefully and detect all the traces of its history, because this is of course part of its history. Books were precious, once again, books were expensive, and people tried to keep them for a long time. So this also means that some old books could get a new life thanks to an owner who decided that there was some way to enhance the value of the book. Well, I have here a few pictures about the Western collections, which are interesting because sometimes it's important. They freeze the manuscripts. In the Islamic world, manuscripts were, until a recent date, part of the daily life. And people, for example, binders, were perfectly able to make a new binding to an old manuscript when the binding was too damaged to survive. Well, In the West, of course, people couldn't do that, and either they kept the things in their state, and if we know, for example, that this binding entered a French collection at that date, we know that the binding is prior to this date. If there is a colophon, you will have, let's say, a time span rather limited in order to date the binding, because bindings are difficult to date. In the case of this binding, you have a splendid Napoleonic back to an Ottoman binding. Of course, this is exactly the illustration of my point, that in the West, things were done in such a way that you cannot, you can only have frozen manuscripts, that is to say manuscripts in their state as they were when they entered this collection, or something which are completely new, as this binding of the Escorial collection, which has the binding of the monastery with the plate of the monastery, and you cannot mistake that for an Oriental binding. So it's when you are working in a Western collection, because it may happen that you work in Western collection, be aware that it's also interesting that the history of the manuscripts in the West is somewhat different from what happened when they were in their natural environment. In their natural environment, their life has been lasting to the last century. In the West, on the contrary, it stopped the moment they left their original setting. This is to end this presentation of the history with a rather strange manuscript I discovered in a private collection. A manuscript which was once Waqf in Cairo, in the mausoleum of Sultan Faraj. And there is a note in English in the upper part, which sounds like a Sherlock Holmes detective story, stating that the manuscript has been discovered in a swamp near the Singleton plantation, and given how did Quranic manuscripts land into a swamp in the United States and be given to a judge who gave it later to a public collection? This is a matter of speculation, but you see that the life of manuscript is complicated and full of mysteries, and I hope you will help solving these mysteries. So this is, I think, the end of my talk. If not, we will not have time to look at the manuscript. If you have any question.
Biz şimdi yazmaları inceleyeceğiz. Prof Hanım bize yardım edecek.
Birinci yazma kolofonsuz oluyor. Tabii tarih they took it away. They didn't want to hear me anymore. 17. yüzyıl ama kolofon yok. Yani o veya burada bir kolofon vardı ama bir yaprak kaybedildi. So this manuscript I will not dwell a lot on it. It's a nice example. Of course, in this case, it's difficult to study because, as you see, the first page has been glued on later restoration of the binding. So, if there was any information here, it has been lost. You notice that here there is a waqf mark. It may be that on the first recto, that is to say, the side of the folio which we cannot see, there was a waqf statement, but now it's impossible to see that. We just have here this note which has been partly erased, which means that it was waqf somewhere.
Türkçe konuş istersen.
Evet, olur. Evet, ona kötü Türkçe'de devam edeceğim. Kusura bakmayınız çünkü. O zaman süsleme tabii bir tarih hakkında bir nasıl diyorsunuz information fikir veriyor, yani bir tahmin edebiliriz ama yazma tarihi üzerinde başka bir şey yok.
Durumu da o yüzden çok şey yapamıyorum.
Evet, o zaman başka...
Diğer tarafa mı geçelim?
Hayır, herhalde bu...
Başka kitaba mı geçelim?
Evet, o ikinci kitaba. Bu ikinci eser bir süre enem kitabıdır. Birinci sayfada hiçbir haber yok. Yani süsleme klasik Osmanlı süsleme oluyor ve sonunda birkaç not buluyoruz. Ve şu notlar o yeni bir durum gösteriyor. Onlar daha geç notlar oluyorlar ve diyor ki bu kitap Şeyh Hamdullah tarafından kopya edilmiştir. Tabii bunlar çok daha geç, çünkü bir tarih var. 1124 Hicri senesinde yazıldı. Demek ki kitap, üretim ve not arasında birkaç yüzyıl var ve tabii başka bir fikir olabilir. Yani Şeyh Hamdullah hakkında bu tarihte ne biliyorlar pek bilemiyoruz. Herhalde bu kitap çok önemli çok.
Buna bakabilir arkadaşlar. Evet. İlk cilt çok iyi değildi de o yüzden pek şey yapamadım. Ama buna
mesela değil mi? Şu mistarları falan varsa
bunlara bakabilir belki arkadaşlar.
Değil mi? Mistar varsa mesela. Şöyle mi? Şurada bir tane marjinal çizgisi var mı?
Evet, süsleme de evet, tesil.
Şu kutularınıza bakın demeyin.
Tabii şimdi bu kitabın kağıt da bakması lazım. Belki bu kağıt Batı kağıt olabilir. Demek ki daha geç bir eser olacak veya orijinal bir şark kağıtı olabilir. Bu kağıtlar bakmak için şimdi nasıl
Işıklı levha var.
Levha, evet. Ve bunlar çok iyi çünkü ben hatırlıyorum ilk senelerde şöyle kağıtlar yani gün ışıkıyla baktım ve tabii hiçbir şey güzel gözükmüyor ama şimdi bu levhalar ile çok güzel ve hakiki bir imtihan yapabilirsiniz.
Bunda nasıl bir şey var?
Evet. Ve mesela örnekler arasında bir yazma restore edildi ve 2 kağıt var. Bu durumda bu ışık levhalar ile çok güzel gözüküyor ve hemen cevap veriyor. Bu ikinci cilt tarihli oluyor. Güzel bir örnek oluyor çünkü bir yuvarlak bir kolofon var. Genellikle bu yazmalarda kolofon başka bir yazıda yazılır. Kur'an metni için bir hat kullanılır ve kolofon için diğer bir yazı kullanılır. Tabii o da yani nasıl denir forgery yapmak için daha kolay çünkü metin ve kolofon arasında fark varsa normal olabilir. Bu çok bu yazma
İkinci idareyim.
Evet, hatta evet, o yani Hattat ismi buradadır. Hasan al-Maruf al-Uskudari ve Arapçada yani çok güzel çıkmıyor çünkü Bil Uskudari olacaktı daha doğru oluyor. Herhalde o çok güzel bir eser belki. Ve tabii cilt hakkında konuşmuyorum ama cilt çok ilginç, çok güzel bir klasik örnek oluyor. Evet, cilt tabii başka bir şey maalesef bugün vaktimiz az oldu.
Niye ketebeyi başka renk, başka yazıyla yazıyorlar acaba? Onun bir
çünkü bir yani Kur'an metin için bir hat ile yazılı. Yani eskiden her tip her metin için özel bir hat oluyordu. Mesela şiir için nostaljik kullanılır. Ve böyle değil ama genellikle şöyle çalışıyor ve o Kur'an-ı Kerim kopyalar için başka bir şey var ki metin kudüs olarak bir yani kolofon ile karışılmaz öyle.
Yani bir bakıma metine saygı duymak açısından mı belki o şekilde yapıyorlar? Hani metin yazı.
Hayır, yani başka bir örnek size göstereceğim.
Güzel. 280 mi lazım?
Hayır değil. C'est peut-être celui-ci, 175. Evet. O da hat çok değişik oluyor. O da mesela burada lam alif ve alif arasında bir beraber yazılır. O Kur'an metninde öyle bir şey olamaz.
Evet, bunun bir de çok güzel. Bunu bir gösterelim değil mi?
Evet.
Bunun içi çok dikkatli bakabilirsek.
Ve tabii büyük atatlar ile durum biraz değişik olur çünkü İslam dünyasında bibliofil yani kitap koleksiyonlar çok önemli bir şey oluyor ve tabii büyük atatlar eserler çok pahalı, çok mühim oluyorlar ve bunun için özel bir durum oluyor ve koleksiyon arasında birkaç belge var ve bu belgeler aynı şey diyorlar. Bu eser hakikaten Derviş Ali veya Şeyh Hamdullah tarafından kopya edilmiştir. Çünkü bir garanti gibi lazım. Çünkü başka bir örnek göstereceğiz. Bu orada çok güzel bir cilt ile çıkıyor. O tabii o cilt restore edildi. Tesip var. Ve sonunda bir kolofon. Ve o da aynı şekilde. Burada mesela Sure An-Nas burada bitiyor. Ondan sonra sadakallahu bir o kolofon değil ama bir explicit gibi bir şey oluyor ve ondan sonra kolofon başka bir yazı ile şuradan itibaren çok değişik ama çok belli ve o çok önemli bir şey yani bir protokol gibi bir şey oluyor. Evet, çeşit değişik. Ve bu kolofon içinde çok ilginç çünkü hatta diyor ki o kaçıncı Kur'an nasıl dit 45 40 hayır 45. Kur'an oluyor. Ve burada silinmiş. İş bu musaf başlıyor. Yani, tabii evet o bu Kur'an üzerinde bir yani bir belge gibi oluyor. Tabii okuyabilirsiniz ama silinmiş.
Aslında çok dikkatli bakın.
Evet bak evet.
Biraz incelemek lazım.
Pardon, bir şey sorabilir miyim acaba? Bir şey sorabilir miyim?
Evet.
Şimdi şu bu kadar güzel tesip yapıyorlar. Ama bu marjinlerden tesiplerin ucunu da, tığların ucunu da keserler.
Evet.
Ve ne düşünüyorsunuz?
Dediğim gibi yazmalar uzun bir ömrü ile yaşıyorlar. Evet çok ve herhalde İslam dünyasında cilt çok hafif oluyor ve bu çok defa kesilmiş ve tabii o zaman yapıyor ve ondan sonra yeni bir cilt istiyorlar. Ve herhalde yeni bir cilt yaparken nasıl diyorsunuz?
Tıraşlamak.
Evet, kesilmesi lazım.
Orijinal cildi de olanlarda da var. Aynı şekilde.
Ama o orijinal cilt değil.
Yok yok bu değil. Ama var hani.
Mesela bu orijinal aslında
Ha.
Hiç
mesela.
onarım görmemiş.
Evet. Ha.
Yazmalarda da tığların uçları
Ama bu
kesilebiliyor.
gösterebilirim, daha güzel bir örnek göstereceğim size. No, hayır. O mesela burada eski bir cilt yeniden kullanılmış. Çünkü mesela şöyle bir şey olmaz. Bir şey evet ve burada daha geniş oluyordu ve buraya kadar geliyor.
Uydurabilmek için.
Evet çünkü yani ciltler, kitaplar pahalı olarak yani devam kullanmak mümkün olursa devam yani restore yapıyorlar. Başka bir örnek vardı. Est-ce que c'est...
Yazmalar için de öyle yapalım. 18 derecesi şu kadar büyük.
Est-ce qu'il n'est pas ça?
O zaman bu şekilde ait
178. Bu örnek daha enteresan olabilir çünkü bir yani diğer yazmalar ile yeni bir yazma yapıldı. Şu tezip orijinal ama başka bir kitaptan geliyor çünkü burada her tarafta kesildi.
Bunun içine yapıştı.
Evet çünkü başka bir yani diğer bir Kur'an-ı Kerim'den bu yapraklar alındı ve şu evet ve iki sayfa vardı çünkü üst üste yapışmış.
Peki bu tesiple bu tesis birbirine uymuyor mu?
Hayır
Sonradan mı tesiplenmiş?
benim için o başka bir yazma eserden alındı. Ondan sonra sonunda
Bu içeride de şey var, yazı var.
evet yazı çünkü
Tam ortada yazı.
evet ama o normal bir şey oluyor ve sonunda çok ilginç çünkü burada çok önemli bir kolofon var çünkü çok meşhur bir Hatat isim var. Burada tabii silinmiş.
Çok var böyle. O kadar
Ve
çok var ki.
o tesip bu tesiplerden çok değişik oluyor. Yani burada daha ince bir süsleme. Burada
hiç değil mesela değil mi? Burada çok
evet bunlar beraber yapılmış ve o normal değil. Yani bir şey vardı ardında ve şöyle ve bence bu kolofon yani daha geç bir şey olması lazım.
Belki burada atıf notları vardı. Sonra onu kolofona dönüştürdü.
Evet o herhalde bu yazma tarihi çok farklı olabilir.
Metinle kolofon aynı
Evet.
tarih değil.
Tabii evet gösterebilirim.
Siz baktınız mı şeylere? Hep devamlı buraya mı veriyorum? Geliyor mu?
Evet o zaman şimdi size bir evet.
Cömleği böyle.
Evet o
İlk defa bak görüyormuş.
o belki kutuda bırakacak çünkü
Evet,
o
burada.
biraz evet o evet o aynı şekilde bu yazma sonunda belgeler var Yani ve diyorlar bu hakikaten Şeyh Hamdullah. Ama aynı şekilde bir süsleme burada geliyor ve o çok normal değil. Yani genellikle böyle bir şey olamaz. Ve şu mavi bu maviden çok farklı oluyor. Demek ki evet bilmiyorum ama o daha geç bu sayfa üzerinde yapılmış ve yani belki bir orijinal bir kolofon vardı. Çünkü o An-Nas suresi sonu dur. Burada belki sadakallahu ta'ala ve burada bir kolofon olabiliyordu ama şimdi hiçbir şey gözükmüyor. Sonra bu belgeler hep diyor, bu belgeler meşhur hattatlar tarafından yazıldılar ve hep aynı şey diyorlar. Bu orijinal Şeyh Hamdullah şeyin diye.
Yani kitabın dışında yok var değil mi?
Evet. Ve bu yazmada birinci sayfa bir vakfiye var. Valide Sultan Sultan Abdülaziz annesi olması lazım. Annesi. Evet o. Ve herhalde bu vakfi var ve tabii sonunda aynı şekilde bir belge var ve orada ve tabii Şeyh Hamdullah kolofonu yok ama belgeler diyorlar o hakikaten bir şeyhin kopyası oluyor. Evet. Ama yazma orijinal olarak aşağı yukarı 16 yüzyıldan tarihli olması lazım. Çok güzel bir... Hayır, o Kur'an, evet. Çok güzel bir yazma.
Abdülaziz'in annesi var.
Ha, evet ama evet o daha sonra vakf edilmiş çünkü tarih bir yerde olması lazım. Sanat 1280 Hicri. Hayır, o 19. yüzyıldan. Evet.
Değerli meslektaşlarım, kıymetli öğrencilerimiz, bu Sabancı Üniversitesi Sakıp Sabancı Müzesi'nin düzenlediği el yazma kitaplar üzerinde araştırmalar semineri ve Sayın Profesör Francois Deroche bitirmiş bulunuyor. Kendisine çok teşekkür ediyoruz.
Ben teşekkür ediyorum.
Hem bizi aydınlattınız, hem kitap severleri bir araya getirdiniz. Bu alanın çalışanları ve bu alanda çalışmaya aday. Bakınız 15 öğrenci var. Onlar da olacak. Böylelikle hatta burada hocaların hocası olanlar değil mi? Öğrenciler, hocalar hepsi bir araya geldi. En başta Günsel Hanım, Günsel Hanım'ın öğrencileri, onların öğrencisi. Hep bir araya geldik. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz.
Ben çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Sizlere de müzemiz adına teşekkür ederiz. Katıldınız bu seminere. Ve bu seminerde gerçekleşmesi için Nazan Hanım'ın da belirttiği gibi değerli müzede çalışan arkadaşlarım Ayşe Hanım, Nurçin Hanım, Hüma Hanım bu işte çok çalıştılar. Sizlere duyurular gitti geldi Ocak ayından beri. Evet, teşekkür ediyoruz efendim. Ama bitmedi törenimiz değil mi? Size bir sürprizimiz var. Katılım belgesi vereceğiz. Sayın hocamız imzalayacak.